All right, welcome everyone. Great to see everybody here today. My name is Amy Fong, and I'm a partner with Everest Group, and we're going to get kicked off. Thanks to everyone on the internet who is joining us on LinkedIn Live. Please let us know where you're from, where you're joining us from today, and if you have experience with supplier diversity, especially globally beyond the US, we would love to hear about that as we go. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions of our panel, make your own comments in the chat. So please join in. We're really happy to have an audience here. Why don't we start by some introductions? Again, I'm Amy Fong. I lead our programs focused on sourcing and supplier management at Everest Group. Everest Group is a global services and next-gen technology research firm. And supplier diversity is something that my team has been looking at quite deeply recently. So we're excited to do this LinkedIn Live today and have an opportunity to hear some different voices. Nishant, tell us about yourself and your role.
Hello, everyone. So excited to be here and talk about this important topic. So, my name is Nishant, and I lead procurement operations and supply diversity for Parexel. I have over 20 years of experience working in different industries. Currently working with Parexel, which is into life sciences. I worked with a financial institution. I worked with a manufacturing company, a services company, a telecom, and hospitality, and worked in different geography. And recently, I've been working and leading supplier diversity initiative for our organization. And we are going to talk about this. We are definitely going to exchange thoughts and ideas. We are going to share what are our experience, and we definitely like to hear from you if you have some things to share with us. So welcome everyone. So
Great,
Khushbu, over
thanks
to
for
you.
joining us. We are happy to have you here today. It's always great to have somebody who's out in the field doing this, as a practitioner. And Parkcell does great work. So I know you're here speaking for yourself, not for them, but great to have somebody from a company that's got a lot of deep experience here. Kushbu, great to have you on as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. Hi, everyone. Really excited to be here. I'm Khushbu Hanjura. I'm working as a senior analyst with Everest Group in the sourcing and vendor management team with Amy. I'm leading the supply diversity research from my wing, and in my experience, working in this particular field, I've learned so much that's happening. I feel like both enterprises and service providers are doing so much work in this particular field, and I'll be glad to hear more from our audience as well as to what they think about supply diversity and how it can change the upcoming procurement practices as well. So good to be here. Really excited for the discussion.
All right, thanks. Well, I think with that we can get started. Kushbu, what would you like to hear from Deshaun? I'll let you take the lead on some of the questions here so we can get going. But to the audience, if you're on the, please feel free to comment on the chat. I see we've got a bunch of people coming in. I see someone from London, and I'm sure we have a very global audience today. But if there's a question you'd like to hear from us, please post that as well.
Thanks, Amy. I believe before we get into the whole questions and answers round, why don't we, for our audience, play a short video on which talks about what is supplier diversity, just to set some context to this conversation.
Yeah, that's a
What
great
is
idea.
supplier diversity? Supplier diversity is equaling the playing field so that everyone has access to the same opportunities. Supplier diversity is a strategy that seeks out and welcomes diverse suppliers regardless of their ethnicity, gender, or socioeconomic status. Diverse suppliers are defined as businesses 51% owned by a minority, woman, LGBT, veteran, service disabled veteran, disabled, or historically underutilized business. Organizations benefit by gaining access to innovation, fresh ideas, and extraordinary capabilities. This may all translate into additional competitive advantages, increased value to supply chains and stakeholders. Supplier diversity is an intentional strategy that drives change and encourages the inclusion of often overlooked suppliers with exceptional capabilities. Secondly, it can be a low risk, cost effective discovery process for ideas, concepts, and insights that may never be encountered otherwise. How can this work in reality? Consider you're a healthcare corporation wanting to expand your consumer base by marketing to a new diverse consumer your insights team has determined is an untapped market. To help create a multicultural strategy to engage this new consumer, your procurement team aids with finding multicultural agencies, not only diversely owned, but specialize in knowing how to engage consumers. In identifying a diverse agency, you are now able to enhance this new customer's experience and, as a result, achieve record breaking customer satisfaction, loyalty, and differentiate yourself from competitors. Supplier diversity is a business process and strategy sustained by vendor diversification, feeding a pipeline of ingenuity, empowering all communities to thrive.
Wow, what a great video. This uh, helps us to perfectly understand what is it when we are essentially saying supplier diversity, and how far providers have come along and really showed their potential as well to enterprises, and their capabilities as diverse providers. So Nishant, I was very curious to know. So when we talk about supplier diversity as a concept, right? We all know that it essentially is a pretty mature concept in US. The definition essentially is an company which is 51% owned and operated by an individual or a group which is part of a traditionally underrepresented or under served group. But I was, also curious to know that when we talk about regions outside of US, right, Europe, APAC, over there as well, now enterprises are interested to know, like, who are the diverse providers out there. So, are there any specific, region specific nuances to, what supply diversity essentially means when we talk about it in a more global sense?
Right. So thanks, Kushbu, for this question. As we saw the video in the context, it's about engaging more diverse suppliers in a supply chain and providing more opportunities for these marginalized communities. And before we go about talking about what's happening in the US and globally, we have to understand why it's being done as a business, right? So there's a recent research which mentioned that about 70% millennial buyers are going to be a customer for the companies with whom they feel that the values are aligned, and about equally same percentage are not going to work with the companies as an employee or as a customer if they find the values are not aligned. So this is a business need and it's evolving. It's not just US phenomenon, it's everywhere, right? So the business has to respond. And the second aspect is that minority business majorly in any economy serve as the backbone. They employ millions of people, right? So while in US it's more mature, there are more certifying agencies like NMSDC or WBNCs, but outside the US and other regions, the program is gaining prominence. Now let's talk about some of the examples. Is VConnect is presence in multi-country. So these are majorly, if you find, we have women-owned businesses which are majorly available everywhere. And then even if you don't have a certified diverse supplier, there are many possibilities, and in every industry there are diverse suppliers. So already the companies will be working with diverse suppliers. It's just identifying if they are certified or not. And what is happening in like in UK, there is the MSD UK. So there are some organizations which are working to get this MSD UK to certify some of the suppliers in other parts of Europe, like Ireland or France, Germany, which will help us identify suppliers in that region. China, there is an agency called China MSD. So they are now promoting, as a non-profit organizations promoting diverse suppliers. In India, there is a Dalit Chambers of Commerce in India, which is promoting Dalit entrepreneurs. Then you have government supported MSME, which is the medium and small scale businesses. Then you have in Australia, you have Supply Nation, or you have original supply categories. Similarly, in South Africa, you have South Africa Supply Development Council. So these are things which are working in different regions, and it depends on the region where you're working. So for any procurement professional to start getting into region, first is to identify is any certifying agency available or not. Second is to identify how do we access the database. There could be multiple source, but how do you access that database? The third one would be is what is the local regulation? Like I was talking about MSME, there's a local regulation in India. So you have to identify there are certain frameworks. You have to understand the region and define your supplier diversity program. And even if you are not having any certifying, there is no harm to always engage a diverse supplier with women-owned, LGBTQ, veteran, disabled. These all bring value to business. So there is always a starting point in the region. Suppose there is no certifying agency, but there is no stopping to start this program. All right.
Great.
So
Yeah. Yeah, some very helpful perspectives that you have shared with us, Nishant. And of course, speaking about, you spoke very briefly about some of the key drivers as well, right? When it comes to, having a program for supplier diversity, most of the times we are essentially working for with diverse providers, but we don't really know that they are essentially minority owned. So, identifying those providers and working very strategically with them, and making sure to provide them support as well, so that they can offer services and truly prove their potential to their greatest strength. I think that is something that should definitely be focused upon by enterprises. So, talking briefly about some key drivers for supply diversity, right? We often get this question from our clients as well, that what are some of the key drivers when it comes to the whole supply diversity program. So just wanted to understand from Amy, you and Nishant as well, that in your experience, what has worked well when it comes to implementing the program and building that business case in front of the leadership to have a robust supply diversity program.
Yeah, so thank you. This is a great question. And, the slide here shows some of the things we've heard from clients and that we've gathered in the research. I've been looking at supplier diversity in the US, where companies have been focused for a long time. And some of the research that I've done in the past 10, 15 years has shown that that diverse suppliers perform as well or better than other suppliers, often smaller suppliers that have a lot of new opportunities, incentive, are really attentive, more flexible, more agile to support a company's needs. As we look at this from a global services perspective, there's also a talent advantage when we talk about getting to untapped talent, and having a more stable and engaged customer or supplier base, especially for companies that maybe aren't the biggest in their field, but they're looking for suppliers that are going to be more attentive, give them more opportunities for new technology, their highest level of support, all of that. Often there's some cost savings to diversifying the supply base a bit, and building that brand equity as well. So you mentioned that from an employee and a customer standpoint, most companies, their employees and their customers are diverse. There's a lot of different people there. There's a lot of different voices. There's benefit to having those different voices in your supply chain, whether they're sitting at a design, at the table for design, or dealing with customer complaints, or in a contact center, or any other part really of the supply chain. It's important to have a lot of diversity in thinking. We know from all of the research that diversity in thinking helps. So bringing that into your supply base is very important. And I think that, the kind of talent advantage, the resilience, the purpose-driven mission are all things that benefit companies while they're having a positive social impact on the world.
Great. So, very powerful insights, Amy. I mean, we keep hearing these points from our clients as well. And that is some of the best in class organizations out there, are also looking at these themes when it comes to building a robust case for supplier diversity. Which brings me to my second question, that when it comes to some of the best in class organizations who have slightly mature programs of supplier diversity, right, what are the kind of providers that they have worked with? Nishant, I was very curious to know about, since you have so much experience working with different supplier diversity programs. In your experience, can you share some use cases with us? You know when it comes to different enterprises, how are they essentially working more with such providers?
All right. So again, this is an interesting question, and I'll just go back to what Amy said. Is a business need. It's not a must, a good to have. It's a must to have a strategy. And DI is becoming more of the cornerstone for any organization success. And when you get a diverse suppliers, you are getting a diverse leadership, which come with more ideas, innovative solution, competitive pricing. And I'll take one of the example as the recent case where one was the trucking supplier owned by a minor business, and they were providing services for one of the pharma clients. And they started with one location, and based on their performance, like Amy said, that diverse supplier doesn't mean that you compromise on the quality. And the studies have been that most of the diverse suppliers has been meeting or exceeding expectation. So they continue to expand, and they got more business. And they added more service line where client asked them to open a cold storage warehouse for the pharma clients. So what happened for the supplier? They added more service line. Their revenue increased by 60%, and for the client, they got a service from a low-cost service provider, meeting their requirement, and brought in operational efficiency because the supplier was ready to do some of the tactical work, which was being performed by the client currently by their own resources. So that is one example. How do you partner? How do you collaborate? The other example is COVID time, where there is a home healthcare provider, and you had to take care of the patient at their home, but there are patients with a disability. Now how do you make sure that you are attending to them? So they bought a clear mask from diverse supplier, and with this clear mask the staff were wearing, the patient could understand what they're talking by reading their lips, and they continue to provide a service. So these are real life examples which are impactful, which are making impact. Then there is a billion dollar roundtable with the companies about for 35 plus, which have committed about $1 billion spent per year, and totally they have spent about close to 100 plus billions in last year, and economic impact of that is about close to 200 billion. So this is the impact happening across the globe, across the companies, across the industries. Yes, different industry may have different nuances. Some sectors or mostly indirect purchases may have more diverse supplier penetration, versus if you have more regulated environment, it would be difficult. It's not impossible, but you have to mentor and partner and get the supplier. You have to develop the supplier. But these are some of the cases. Other case or example I can say is you work with a supplier and get people with disability to support on your sites, or people from IoT background to support on your projects or studies. And this is the way you are creating career opportunities for those people. You're creating more purchasing power for these communities, and you are supporting everyone. So we are supporting the communities we are living, and it is the right thing to do. It's not just a business strategy, but it's the right thing to do. All right.
Great examples shared, Nishant. And to the last point that you mentioned, that it's not just a profitable thing to do; it's also the right thing to do, right? So that is something that we all really need to abide by when enterprises are essentially launching a supplier diversity program. You mentioned billion, dollar roundtable, and that actually reminded me of Meta, who started they launched their supplier diversity program in 2016, and their mission essentially is to create more opportunities for diverse owned companies to do business with them, and make people and communities connect with them. During our research for when we were doing research as to what different enterprises are doing out there, We also looked at Meta and some service providers that they are working with. For example, they are working with a cybersecurity firm called Certus, which is a Black and veteran-owned business, which is providing cybersecurity services for leading global corporations, and they have different specializations like cloud, IoT, and payment security services. And they did a business case with Meta as well, and Meta has engaged with them in a variety of projects. Similarly, there is another service provider called Hugo ML, and they pitched their very unique capabilities to Meta, and they offer to build a remote data labeling and content moderation teams in West Africa, which to provide a previously missing perspective to the AI community. And Meta essentially became their first client, and they were able to deliver such powerful work for them. So essentially the idea over here is that when given a chance and an opportunity, the diverse owned providers can provide so much value to your firm. So yeah, I think great examples shared all together. And talking about some, I know we addressed it in a different way initially as well, and we are getting some questions in the comment section as well. That when it comes to, culturally speaking, what are the different nuances when it comes to diversity initiatives? So, Nishant, coming back to you, right? Do you think that the programs vary across, different regions, like let's say outside US, and specifically talking about India as well and other European nations as well? Have you seen that because of the shift in culture, there is a shift in programs as well?
So cultural nuances definitely drive, and there are cultural requirements, regional requirements. Uh, but the base foundation is why we are doing this. The base foundation is to do the right things to support the marginalized communities in those regions. So the different definition or different marginalized communities in India could be different in China, could be different in Africa, and we have to work and identify which are the marginalized communities there, which could be part of the program. I was giving example in like in Brazil, you have Black Brazilians community. In South Africa or in Canada or in Australia, you have Aboriginal communities. So in different communities in India, I was giving example of Dalit Chamber of Commerce, which is more about Dalit communities in India to provide the business opportunities. Then there is a women, which is very prominent is across, right? It doesn't vary with the region. So in any region, we have women, disability people, veteran, LGBTQ, and sometimes the regulation may not define that clearly. But again, going back to thinking, is that the right thing? It's more being inclusive, is getting more people, more diverse opinion, and making everyone contribute and making them feel that they can contribute their best.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. By definition, when we go global, if you're talking about what a minority supplier is, well, the definition of a minority and the groups that are underrepresented are going to be different in every geography, right? Even looking at the US and Australia, which many people would say are fairly, similar. Australia, you have I'm going to get language wrong because it's been a while, but Aboriginal people's groups there, a lot of different groups that might need that additional boost or need that additional attention that's different than North America, different language around it. Even the UK as well has different history. So understanding that historical context of the areas that you're working in. I know there's a comment here about LGBTQ plus in the UK versus in Poland. And thank you, Patrick, for joining and participating. It sounds like Out Britain does a great amount of work there. The question or the comment that those individuals aren't identified. I'm sure they exist in Poland, first of all. So let's acknowledge that. I know that's just language, but that's not an identified group. That's not a label that companies can identify by in that country. That does add a challenge to it. And I think as organizations, you can look. Every large company has to grapple with their own way of defining workforce diversity, and those same challenges apply when you're thinking about supplier diversity. I mean, we have that in our own global company, right? What the needs are to elevate and to support different groups of people in every context are a little bit different. So I would bring that to your supply base. If you're a sourcing person trying to drive diversity in a country, in the US, it's fairly well defined. But if you're defining that in a new area, a new region of the world, look at what does workforce diversity look like here, and how do I identify that in our suppliers? And there's the challenges, and I know we're going to talk about the challenges a little bit, but one of the challenges is that you may be in countries where groups are not identified. They're not they're not, the labels don't quite fit. There's no way of self-certifying or certifying publicly. So you need to get creative or get the purposeful, thoughtful in how you define that for your company, right? And to Nishant's point, it's really about, being purposeful and intentional. And I think traditionally there's a default to think of supplier diversity as something that's compliance related and hitting, and in the US especially, but it's not necessarily about compliance. It's about doing the right thing, and what does the right thing look like in this particular economic environment, in this particular legislative environment, whatever, in this geography. What does good look like, which may be a bit subjective, and that I don't think is necessarily a bad thing if it's a little bit subjective, if your leadership is aligning to their company values.
Yes,
So,
all.
go ahead.
Yeah, just wanted to add to this, right? Because I remember having a conversation with a client who was from India, and he mentioned that in US they have a very mature supplier diversity program, and what they are essentially trying to do is now trickle that down to India as well. So they have established a diversity champions team in India, and now they are looking for when it comes to supply diversity, which are the different groups out there that they can essentially look at, right, when it comes to engaging with diverse providers. So in the Indian context, what is also happening a lot is that enterprises are working a lot with women-owned enterprises. There is an organization called WeConnect, which is globally recognized when it comes to having the supply diversity initiatives. And of course the LGBTQ communities and the veterans communities. So of course we have all these cultural nuances in every country, and the idea is to have that perspective and have that judgment and see and research in the market, like what are the different communities out there that you can essentially engage with. The other piece that I also, since we are talking a lot about challenges, right, and opportunity areas, I wanted to also touch upon some of the challenges, right, which are being faced right now by diverse providers, because while building the research, we were able to essentially work with, talk with a lot of diverse providers, and during the conversations that we were having with them, they all mentioned many challenges that they are facing, working with enterprises. But there are some typical challenges that diverse providers essentially face, and I wanted to talk about those over here. So for example, number one is pretty intuitive, right? Like limited access to capital, because diverse providers by definition they are essentially pretty small, so it's more challenging for them to acquire adequate funding for having those contracts in place which can in future hinder their ability to invest in proper technology and marketing to make sure they are scaling up with their competitors as well. And with each challenge, I think there are opportunities for sourcing managers and diversity champions as well, in order to collaborate better with diverse providers. What we are seeing right now in the market, essentially what best in class organizations are doing are they have the mentorship programs as well, which provide access to diverse providers. There's strategic diverse providers to financial management skills and other growth opportunities, so that they are able to get more contracts, and they are able to work more efficiently with them. And there are a couple of other challenges as well, right? Like, for example, networking and visibility barriers. Like you mentioned, Nishant, that there is a case that you might be working with a diverse provider, but the enterprises don't even know that they are a minority owned provider, because there are those visibility barriers as well. And similarly, limited access to contract opportunities, which can perpetuate economic disparities. So these are some of the challenges that I saw when I was talking to some of the diverse providers. Nishant and Amy, in your experience, do you also see these challenges happening in the market? Are there some other challenges as well coming up, and how are providers working with enterprises to mitigate those challenges?
Okay, so let me go first. So a couple of things on the financial one. What is happening is there are different strategies which can be applied. First is when you're reviewing the supplier, you can agree a favorable payment term so that you can make sure that they have better cash flow. Again, that has to be aligned with internal financial system and policies. The second one is you support suppliers in promoting and securing more business, right? There are industry groups where you talk about a supplier, you recommend them in the network group. There's a diversity alliance for science, where you have people or companies working in life sciences, where you share the best practices. You should also connect and network which are the suppliers you're using, and that's how you help them grow. The other way is you mentor suppliers by sponsoring them some education. There are many NMSDC or WBC, they host this accelerator program or mentorship programs, so there could be a sponsorship opportunities there. And then you meet them in those industry group networks, matchmaking events. Then you can have outreach activities. You can send your sourcing requirements in the larger group and ask for recommendation. So the various ways corporates are trying to mitigate. And the last point you mentioned about limited contracting strategy. So what is happening is there's a bit of conflict with the procurement, right? Because we do a double hatting. So as a procurement, the strategy is spend consolidation, supply consolidation. But with emerging market environment, you also have to find a backup supplier, multi-sourcing. So you can use a diverse supplier there. The other area you can do is you can look at what's happening about with the supplier in the environment, in sense uh, the big companies are getting business, right? Because of the qualification, the supplier may not be able to qualify. So you start tier two programming so that this big suppliers engage diverse supply in the supply chain, and the end product supplier, a diverse supplier, may not be able to provide. So they may be able to provide a piecemeal service. So again, adopting a tier two strategy helps to engage a diverse supply in the supply chain. uh, you can make this as a part of the contracting requirement, as part of supplier selection, and also as part of business review meeting. So you enforce that it's not just we are talking about the prime suppliers, but we're also talking about diversity down the supply chain. So these are things which companies can adopt to support a diverse supplier.
That's a great list. Um, really good points there, Nishan. It sounds like there are a lot of good ideas. I want to refer back to a question that someone had earlier. Nick, thank you for asking that. A resource to see the definition of diverse individuals in different geographies. But Kushbu, you mentioned WeConnect. Would that be a good resource to help with that, defining what diversity looks like in different places?
Sorry, Amy, you cut off for me for a
Oh,
second.
I'm sorry. I was asking if you had mentioned We Connect, and I think that
Yes,
is
yeah,
a
yeah,
good
yeah.
that's a good answer to that question in terms of an organization that can help you identify what diversity might look like in different geographies. Um,
Correct, AB. WeConnect will definitely be able to, provide more nuance as to when it comes to different regions. What are some of the definitions, and not just the definitions, right? Like, what are some of the targeted groups as per the cultural and government, rules that you can look at when it comes to the diversity aspect.
Yeah, yeah. And we have no affiliation with them. It just seems like a good resource for that kind of information. And also understanding, the government regulations that might be under consideration or in place. We've been talking a lot about India. Yes, it is for women-owned business. That's correct. We've been talking about India specifically as a country that's increasing their focus on women-owned businesses and putting requirements in for government-related business, and I think that's a good example there. In terms of countries that are sort of establishing new standards, I don't think that there's as much awareness of that in India in my experience so far. So I would suggest also government organizations are looking for sort of the government contacts and what might be being set up in certain countries. Often there are offices that are leaving that. I see a question here around diverse suppliers in the US as well, which is the one that we get a lot. I'll give a short answer, but I'd love to hear Nishant's view on that as well, what they use. And I also want to, I see another person from Parksall who can maybe answer in the chat if they have thoughts. There are a number of different sources. The challenge in the US is probably that there's a lot of regional and local level certifications, state level, regional, government entity level, so because we have so many levels of government, finding one global database can be a challenge. There's a number of technology providers that can help with that. Two that I'll throw out, not endorsing them, but Tealbook and Supplier.io both have that kind of data available. But there's also, the NMBC, the National Minority.
NMSTC, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
NMSTC. Thank you. I get that one wrong every time, even though I know many individuals in that organization. Looking at that at looking with those regional groups can be helpful because they have identified those businesses. Nishant, any thoughts on how you identify, and this can be US and non-US, how are you identifying diverse suppliers?
All right. So I will not say just diverse supplier. Unless we are in procurement have it, I have to identify a supplier. How do I do that? I
Yes.
reach out to my peers. I do a research. I find out industry groups. I find out on the internet. That are one option. Then there are certifying agencies like NMSDC, WBENC, you're talking about disability.in. So they have directories where you can search for diverse suppliers. Then there are technology partners which have a consolidated directory for the supplier. And one thing to remember, this certification has expiry date because the agencies,
Mhm.
nature may change, their ownership may change, their size may change. So it's always evolving. So the certification has an expiry date, so you also have to keep finding what are the ways you can use your supply information system or AP system to continuously monitor. It also requires maintenance because you cannot assume a supplier is once diverse is always diverse. So you have to keep that maintenance and outreach, matchmaking events or other activities. So those are the outreach programs or avenues from you can source a supplier.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of conferences that are aimed just at this. That I know quite a few diverse certified suppliers I know of that are smaller businesses attend that are really designed as matchmaking events. But you're right, it takes kind of continuous focus and effort to, to maintain that and to continuously find that. And the answer, it's great if you do have a tool or a database that can help you access, but for more localized supplier needs, there might be different ways you need to approach that based on based on the country, based on the city, the region, the type of service that you're looking for. This is why we, companies have had supplier diversity teams for a long time now, because there is no quick one way,
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
And also, knowing, you might find a list of, providers, but knowing exactly what is their services portfolio, and, having information on that can also take up some time, right? So NMSDC, like Amy mentioned, WBNC, they come up with their annual reports as well, which have sections on different service providers, minority owned service providers, which you can look at as well. So in that particular report, sometimes there is distinction with the basis the different industries. So you can do a very quick control F and see, like, for your particular requirement, who are the different certified providers that are out there.
Yeah, and if I
Yeah.
can add here, it
Go
goes
ahead.
more about planning, right? So you
Mhm.
don't just say, okay, I need to engage a diverse supplier. So when generally most of the organizations have category planning or annual planning, where you know that these are sourcing events you are going to do, you identify a base requirement, and then you search and pre-qualify some of the diverse suppliers as a pool. And then when the actual event happens, then you can invite those through this outreach program. And then these tools also allow suppliers to also reach out. Well, once you start putting supplier diversity requirements, supplier also themselves reach out that we have this capabilities and we want to participate and work with you.
Yeah, that's a great point. I want to thank David in the chat, who just listed a bunch of the databases, which I didn't have off the top of my head, and it's a lot of acronyms that I would probably not remember even if I had them. But this is a great list of regional diversity councils, NMSDC for the US, MSD UK for Europe, SASDC for South Africa, CAMSC for Canada, MSD China. That sounds like a bunch of alphabet soup, but it's a great list. Copy that out. It should be on LinkedIn. This session is available, so you can always go back to the comments on our LinkedIn chats to see that list. But that is a great starting point. If you're looking in Europe and you're trying to identify that, and identify what does diversity look like, or how do we find diverse suppliers, or South Africa, for instance, another country where there's a lot of opportunity, I think, to find less represented groups, and that might be defined quite differently than other regions you're currently in. That's a really good place to start. All of those organizations, as far as I know, or at least the ones that I'm familiar with, have databases. They have certifications for their members. They have support for their members. They have matching type events. They probably have a lot of other types of ways of supporting you as a buyer that you can tap into. And I know some of the regional leaders for NMSDC in the US, and they've always been very engaged in the procurement community with helping to educate, helping people to understand how, some of the challenges that Nishant mentioned, like how does a large company that's used to working with large suppliers support smaller suppliers or suppliers that may have less experience with that environment, and give them opportunities. And there can be a lot of success there.
Amy, I see an interesting comment, from Patrick, who is interested to know that when it comes to different groups, in terms of the opportunity areas for enterprises, right? And when we talk about CSR as well, what are corporates doing to support all diverse groups equally? So I think that that sets a good premise for what we were going to talk in the later section as well, the impact sourcing, right? And I would like you to touch upon that as well for a bit, that when it comes to sourcing as a concept, I mean, we are not just talking about ownership aspect of it, but there are other different aspects of it as well, and that is where an impact sourcing comes into picture.
Yeah, so Khushbu knows when it's like she's pulling up a soapbox for me to get on practically, because she knows this is a concept that I think is important for us to think about. And there's two layers to this. So for one, going back to something that Sean said earlier, which was sort of tying in what good looks like, or how you define what diversity is going to be for your company. Look at values, look at what groups you truly want to represent, and look at your customer and your employee base as well. So traditionally in the US, we are stuck to a definition that was built in I think it was started in the 50s, 70s. That was on an earlier slide of what diversity looks like. Unless you're doing government work, that definition of diversity is not the only one that you need to follow. And I'm a big believer that to be truly inclusive, you need to define what inclusive looks for your organization, and do it in a broad and open way. So if you're in a country where LGBTQ is not an identified group that's going to be check a box, well, you make that box, right? So look at who your supply base or who your customer base is made up of, what your workforce is made up of, and define how you're going to measure diversity. The other thing in the US definition is that it's very focused on ownership. And while there is a really, that shouldn't go away. That's something I don't want to say that's not important, because it's very important. Part of the idea of diversity is giving opportunity to companies that are started and owned and built by underrepresented groups, and we should keep that on the scorecard. We look a lot in DEI at the workforce diversity of our companies and how we can give inclusiveness and equity to groups of our employees, and also bring that out to our customer base. We should be doing that to our suppliers as well. So that means looking at the workforce diversity of your suppliers and their impact on the community. And I think one of the areas where I've seen impressive, impactful, not to be, this is a bit of a, play on words, but a lot of impact is what in the services community we call impact sourcing. And impact sourcing, there's a slide we can bring up on the definition of this, but impact sourcing is really about working with service providers. And this is mainly for services, because if you're buying a product from a supplier, goods from a supplier, it's going to be really what you're buying is the goods. When you're buying a service, you're buying the people, right? You're buying the time and the intellect and the labor of a group of individuals, and looking at the diversity and the community impact within that. So impact sourcing is the practice of intentionally hiring and providing career development opportunities to people from marginalized communities, while meeting your other business objectives. So this is becoming more and more popular when you're looking at IT services, BPO, any kind of services work. And the target groups could be the target groups can meet a lot of different definitions. Economically disadvantaged groups, which could be minorities. It could be any group below the global or the national poverty line. So in the US, there's a lot of smaller towns that might not look ethnically diverse, but they're certainly impacted economically, and economically diverse areas are a great target for this. Socially marginalized groups that have had less opportunity in the past, unemployed groups. This is when we start to hit the areas like we talk about veterans, but military spouses, right? Military spouses are a group that is often harder to employ because they're moving around a lot and they're fairly dependent on their spouses or their partners assignment. But there's a huge amount of ability there and untapped resources. Incarcerated individuals. So there is a impact sourcing firm that does, I'm not going to name names here, but I'm happy to share it directly with people when we have a report on this that we can share after. But there's a company that uses employs incarcerated women for contact center and sales related activities and work. I've spoken with them. It's great. What they're doing is giving people a path. They're giving them an employment essentially while they're incarcerated, and then a path to a job career path after. And the recidivism rate among those individuals is significantly lower than average. Refugees, migrants, there's just so many groups, survivors of a gender-based violence. That's a very important segment in many communities and countries that, giving people a path to employment has a huge community impact, and an impact individually on those groups as well. And so on those people. So there's certainly a lot of services firms that feel really strongly about this. I think our firm, Everest Group, works with a lot of those groups and has, been in the conversations on how do they support the employee, how do they build standards so that there's no, the sort of the synonym of the parallel of greenwashing, right? How do we make this something that's really impactful and helping to measure that? One of the things that we'll offer as a giveaway after this is the ability to download our database on impact sourcing firms. So we have compiled a whole list of or a report of specialists who focus on impact sourcing. And it's interesting to look at because there are certainly big service providers that you may already be using that offer impact sourcing, and you might just have to ask and have that conversation if they could set up, say, a contact center that serves this, that's staffed by a group of individuals. There's also, firms that are really specialized in this that you can partner with, and I think that there's a way that corporates can make a real impact to support diverse groups or underrepresented groups. And I encourage all of you to do a little, research and get to know that. We have a lot on that. What I find is that I guess there's a couple challenges kind of going on, Kushbu, but the challenges here are, one, a lot of us in sourcing don't know of this. They've never heard of impact sourcing. The language is a little bit different than what we use. So there's just an awareness that sourcing teams aren't really driving this. And two, it doesn't necessarily hit your scorecard for diversity in the traditional way. So it's a different thing to think about, but I want to, and measuring, and you got to kind of go past the smell check of, is this a company that's really doing this? So far, I haven't seen many companies that are labeling something impact sourcing when it's not really impactful. That doesn't seem to be an issue yet. But I think learning about this and looking at, are there any providers in here that could benefit our mission, goes back to that idea we talked about earlier, which is, don't do this to check a box. Think about diversity as, how do we increase diversity in our supply base, both in terms of ownership and the workforce. So, and there's other things as well, asking about the workforce diversity of your suppliers is something that we're seeing more often as well. So that's another way to kind of drive that thinking among your supply base. So I'll stop there. That was she knew she was giving me a soapbox, but I think it's really topic to be thinking about.
No, Amy, yeah, definitely we should thank you for setting the context on impact sourcing, right? Because this, as you also rightly pointed out, this as a concept has essentially been missed by sourcing and procurement professionals, but now is gaining some limelight, and people are looking at different groups and trying to make their own definition when it comes to inclusiveness, right? So I think this is important, definitely more important to talk about. I see a question in chat from Lawrence. His question is, how would you recommend companies listen to buyer intent for companies that are in the market for diverse suppliers? I believe essentially we some of the things that Nishant and Amy were talking about, right? So again, doing that market research, talking to your customers, and engaging in a continuous feedback mechanism, all of that really helps. What essentially also helps is developing some targeted content. So for example, we have also written some blogs on supplier diversity, which got a lot of attention, which also helped us realize, right, like in terms of the questions that we got from our clients, that okay, given the content that you have shared, what are the different other things, some other questions that they again asked us, and then which helped us also to refine our research in a better way. So developing that targeted content also helps. partnering with different supplier diversity organizations to get that level of insight from providers themselves in terms of the preferences of buyers is of course crucial. And um, definitely in your existing supply base, there should be some diverse providers. So first doing that level of research and finding that as a source of information can be leveraged for you as well. Anything else that you would like to add to that list, Nishant? Amy?
Yeah, so what I say is supplier diversity is getting more prominence and it's being driven by the boards of the company. So most of the boards and the executive leadership is asking for reports. So you have to get the support from the leadership to drive this, to ensure there's accountability. There's shared responsibility, not just the procurement, but within the user function as well. And the other point is using a diverse supplier. So there could be already diverse supplier, and you can look at increasing the spend with that diverse supplier. It helps the procurement strategy of consolidation. The other way is we talked about diverse supplier doesn't mean that they are low on quality or inferior in the quality. You have to just provide equal opportunity for them, let them go through the process, and support them in that journey, and continue to help them in the growth. Other way is developing the supplier. Let's say the supplier does not qualify as part of your RFX event or sourcing. It doesn't mean that the work stops here. You can always have a session or conversation with the supplier, tell them, share the feedback, what are the areas they need to improve so that they can win future business opportunities. Then you can also have the supplier getting certified. So when you get the supplier certified, it means that you are also expanding their baseline, their more exposure within this directory. So they will have more client will have access to their information. They can sell more business. And lastly, it has to be why we are doing it. At the end of the day, we are doing it because we have to win business, right? Most of the people say, yes, we are doing it, it's the right thing to do, but what's in for me? So many of the clients are asking this requirement: what is supplier diversity? What is the program? They're asking for tier two reporting. So until unless you put this program, you start tracking, sometimes it may become difficult to have a competitive advantage. It is helping you to get new businesses as with the clients. So if you want to drive that, we need to partner. Everyone has to come together to drive this initiative. All right, back to you, Khushbu.
All great points, Nishant. And with this, I believe we are at the end of the session. But I mean, great discussion altogether, right? Got to learn so much and very insightful questions in the comment box as well. So thanks all for joining and participating in this discussion and asking us very relevant questions. Supplier diversity, in conclusion, I would only say that it has outpaced, and it's gaining a lot of prominence, not just at the leadership level, but even the middle management is um, uh, supporting the initiatives, right? Because those are essentially the people who track KPIs and make sure that the programs are successful. So it's now gaining prominence at each level. So lot of work to be done, but great progress. And let's hope that we are able to have even more greater use cases when it comes to diverse providers providing value for enterprises.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Kushbu, for asking some great questions. Thanks to the audience for joining. I love all the comments and questions. It makes this so much more interesting. And you, I don't want to say stumped, but challenged us on a few because we don't have every answer at our fingertips. So thank you for providing answers to help each other. That's what LinkedIn is all about. And Nishant, thanks for your time. It's been great. Love hearing your story and everything.
Thanks to you, Amy, and Khushbu to provide this opportunity. And as I said, we all have to come together and make sure that this program is successful. We have to make it equitable for all our diverse suppliers. So this is a journey; it will be ongoing, and we'll continue to drive this. So thanks all the audience. Thanks everyone for participating.
Thank you so much, Nishant. Thank you, Amy. Thanks to the audience. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone.